Hello, welcome to another Museum FAQ video. Today we have the distinct pleasure of speaking. Well, I like how you've got your name there, Dr. Jorge. Today we're going to be talking about integrating art and science into programs or events. And so I'm Paul Orselli, President and Chief Instigator of POW, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Jorge Perez-Gallego. I love your background. It's very appropriate for today's conversation. So Jorge, maybe you could start out by just giving people a little bit about your background, and I'll just insert parenthetically here. You may be the absolute perfect person for this conversation, having both a PhD in science and also an MFA. So with that, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
So Dr. Jorge, that's basically because my name is Jorge Perez-Gallego, which is very long. And while I was working at the museum in Miami, Frost Science, I did a lot of public-facing events, and I did a lot of media, and I did a lot of TV, radio, and it was sometimes challenging for people to say my last name properly. So eventually we decided together with the marketing team to build this persona called Dr. Jorge. And I've been using that also when I've been teaching at universities, because it's easier for students that just call me Dr. Jorge or Jorge. Don't try to say Professor Perez-Gallego, is too long. Anyway, but that's just kind of like a side funny story. Before I get into my real background, like my background today is from my favorite episode from Community, Remedial Chaos Theory, that, I don't know how many Community fans are out there. I'm a big fan, and this is like the #1 episode in terms of like how crazy and well written the show is. Anyway, just like a recommendation if you're trying to look for things to watch these days. I think it was just put on Netflix. It was on Hulu, and it's now also on Netflix. So, like free shout out.
Bonus viewing tips here. Community on Netflix and Hulu.
Yes, this is not paid. It's out of my passion for the show. Actually, my wife keeps telling me, like, you watching that show again? Because I actually can watch the show and it ends, and I watch it again. I say, like, I watch this show the same way that you keep listening to Harry Potter audiobooks. That's how this show gets me, or that's how I get the show. Anyway, so my background. As you were mentioning, I have a PhD. I have a PhD in astrophysics. That is because since I was a little kid, probably a story that I share with many astronomers and astrophysics. When I was a little kid, I fell in love with the stars. I grew up in Spain. I grew up in the city in Barcelona, but I was lucky enough to be able to go every summer to the mountains. So I had access to this beautiful, clean, shiny sky that I fell in love with. And then I remember at age 9, 10, around that time, getting into my teens, I found a box in the garage of my uncle full of like VHSs with recordings of the original Cosmos by Carl Sagan. And I binge watched them when binge watching wasn't even a thing, because I had to actually put the VHS in, click play, watch the whole thing, take the VHS, put another VHS, click play, and so forth. And I fell in love not only more with astronomy, but also with the fact that there were people that were trying to convey those complex ideas in a way that anyone, whether they wanted to be astronomers or not, could engage, could actually learn, could actually be inspired. So the combination of those two things made me want to be an astronomer, and also put that seed in my brain of, maybe later on, if research is not for you, it's like, if like hardcore research is not for you, I think you would really find joy on trying to translate those complex ideas into ways that people would actually understand, or at least like start to understand, And that's eventually what happened with me. I got my PhD, I got my postdoctoral, I got a postdoctoral position. My PhD, I got it at the University of Florida. I got my postdoctoral position at one of the most prestigious universities in Spain. But halfway into my postdoctoral position, I decided that I love these, but I really want to explore that other thing that I have been thinking about all my life. And I decided that in order to gather the skills that I thought I needed in order to do that, going to art school was a great idea, because I was going to be able to think about the world in that other way that we think about the world, right? Like, it was Carl Sagan who said, like, science is a way of thinking way more than it is a body of knowledge. And to that, I add that art is a way of thinking way more than it is a body of work. The body of work of an artist is illustrating a way of thinking, a way of approaching, understanding, decoding the world. So in that way, they're complementary ways of thinking, and that was my thinking at the time. And I applied to art school. No one within my network understood my decision.
That's what I was just going to ask you. So here you are, you get a PhD in astrophysics, you go for a postdoctoral, and then it's almost like you slam on the brakes and say, oh, by the way, now I'm going to art school. Like, I can only imagine what your scientific colleagues and maybe even your family thought about that decision.
Yeah, they all thought, like, but aren't you like set on that path? And I said, sure, yeah, but like, at the end of the day, like, life is like a tree. You just need to keep exploring all the branches. If you feel that way, you never know what's the best direction of growth, and in that sense, that's what I felt I needed to do. And I was lucky. I got a full scholarship for my astronomy degree, so I was safe from a financial standpoint. So I applied to art schools, and I was lucky enough to, among a couple others, I was again accepted at the University of Florida. And that was really beneficial, because while I got some sort of help, financial help, the help that you get in the arts is not the same help that you get in the sciences. So the scholarship that I got, or the scholarships that I could even apply to, weren't as succulent. But because I went back to the University of Florida, I was able to get hired by my former advisor and do some work for him while I was getting my art degree. And that also helped and put myself in a situation in which doing these didn't translate it in a financial hardship. So I got to do a lot of work with the Science Museum, the Natural History Museum at the University of Florida, that I use as a playground for a lot of my projects. And I learned one of the most important things during art school, which is how to gather criticism, which is something that I did not know how to do. As a scientist, I have been trained to solve problems, and I had been trained to, if there's something wrong with the problem, we are able to pinpoint where the problem might be, and you can actually go back there and work from there forward again and get the right solution. In art, I remember my first art critique, and I keep telling, whenever I teach these days, I go back to that anecdote because it was really important for me. I remember my first art critique, and this is like, I was among the older, I wasn't that old, but I was among the older people in the class, because, I had like a few years of doing something else and then going back. But they were my colleagues, they were my friends, we were classmates, we were doing happy hour together. And then there's my first critique there, and they're looking at my work and they completely trashed it. And he started getting like really defensive, really like, what's wrong? Like, why wouldn't they tell me before? Like, I did not understand what the purpose of a critique was, and I didn't understand that what they were criticizing was not me. You know, like my first reaction was to get really defensive, but then little by little I understood that they're just reacting to the way my work is making them feel. So that reaction lives actually far away from me. It should be constructive for my career, for my future work, but it has nothing to do with me directly. The way I share these today is that when I build something, there's a relationship between me and my piece. And then that piece will create relationships with other people. The criticism is actually 1, 2, 3 levels of separation from myself. So I should never take it personal. I should care about it because it matters what people think about my work. But I should never take it personal and get defensive because that criticism is separated from me enough in order to understand that. But it took me a while to understand that. And I remember that first critique, it was like really, really tough for me. I went back home and said like, am I doing the right thing? Were these people my friends? Like, I don't know, it was an eye-opening experience in a way.
Well, and it's hard, of course, when you invest so much of yourself into a project, whether that's scientific research or museum exhibit or program or what have you, when somebody clearly expresses that they don't like it. Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to it's what you just described is difficult. There are times when it's difficult not to feel personally engaged in that criticism.
But let me tell you, it has also been really useful in my museum career because developing exhibitions or programs, sometimes you get feedback and criticism. Sometimes that feedback and criticisms come from people that are experts in the field, and sometimes like comes from people that don't know necessarily much about the field, but they're executives that of course have a say. And being able to not take those things defensive has been really useful for me in negotiating how to move forward projects.
So maybe that's a good segue then to maybe talk about some of your work or some of your projects that sort of integrate both art and science. And what I was hoping, I know we spoke a little bit before, is maybe you could give a couple examples of projects that you think really exemplify this combination of art and science, and what you think might be important takeaways from those projects, things you learned or things that other people who are considering art and science sort of integrations or projects could take away from your experiences.
So, like first, like I guess like I'd like to share why I went into science museum world. And the reason for that is because in my mind, a science museum is the perfect example of like science and art collaboration. You go to a science museum and you do not see formulas. You do not see a traditional lab. There's some sort of interpretation. There's some sort of like whimsical add-on to all those concepts. Science museum live in the realm of metaphors, right? And that's a realm that is usually approached by artists, by creatives. If science museums were to depict science as is, always, without thinking about the audience, that's called a university and that's called getting a science degree. That's not the role.
Well, it's not, I mean, I don't think the role, as you're indicating, in a museum or in an exhibition, no matter what kind of museum you're in, you use the key word interpretation. it's not just dumping more information out there, like formulas, or like here's a whole wall of text for you to read all about physics or astronomy. It's really that interpretation that's important.
Yeah, you're opening windows to a world of wonder, right? And then you need to think about the people that are going to come into your institution, and you're going to think about like, how can I do that? Then it's up to them to go buy a book, to go get a college degree, to go talk to an expert. We are facilitating the access, and we try to think of ourselves as a universal entry point that serves everyone in the community. That should be one of our priorities, like make sure that we can reach everyone in the community so everyone feels welcome into this world, for in my case of science, you know, through these windows. But we're providing informal education. We're not providing formal education, but through informal education, you can get to formal education just through inspiring them. And in that sense, like, you need materiality, you know, you need the tangible in order to translate, to interpret these scientific ideas into something that people can engage with. And that's usually something that creatives, artists are used to do. So that's why I think like artists and creatives are really important within the framework of a science museum.
So now you're working in Colorado, but
Yes.
previously you were at the Frost Museum of Science, where we got to work together. Maybe you could pick a project from your time in Miami and pick a project from your time in Colorado that sort of blends or brings together these two strands of science and art, and tell people about that.
So a challenge that we had in Miami is that we did not have back then, the old museum, we did not have a lot of real estate. We did not have a lot of space to actually bring forward the collection. So working with the late Sean Duran and our collection manager Kevin Arrow, and also a local writer Nathaniel Sandler, we envisioned a way to actually activate the collection, try to bring the collection forward in a way that would engage new audiences. And what we did is like, okay, let's just try to partner a scientist and an artist from the community. Let's just like invite them over for coffee, walk them through the collection, talking about what we have, what we don't have, how old this collection is, how we gathered the collection. And let's actually try to create some spark between them, and then give them some funds so they can work on a project together that activates or that brings forward pieces of their collection. And that was like an outstanding project. It got like a beautiful response. We call it the Couriers Boat. And the reason that it was so great, it was because we were able to write about it with Nathaniel. He was able to tell the story of bringing the artists and the scientists together. We were able to build something new that was informed by the collection, and we were able to have like a premiere day. And so it was programmatically beneficial because we were able to develop a program about that collaboration with a little Q&A, a little like screening or anything else that would relate to the topic of the project. And then some of those projects, we were able to actually travel through different institutions. So it also served our outreach program. So this silly idea of bringing an artist and a scientist together allow us to, you know, like write about it, have events about it, and do outreach about it. I remember like there was like this great collaboration between a marine biologist and an artist that works with neon lights, in which they actually interpreted coral as a brain, you know, and there's these beautiful images of the big piece of coral surrounded by neon lights, right? And that was a beautiful piece. Like when we released it, it was like really well attended. And then we were able to bring the piece to a couple of national labs within Miami, so people were able to engage with it also outside of the museum. We did another piece in which Robert Chambers, who is an artist that is a good friend of mine, he worked with Professor Zah from the University of Miami. He works on trying to make aerodynamic aircraft for Mars. You know, Mars, different kind of atmosphere, so different kind of needs. But they worked together and they activated a few pieces that we had in the collection that had to do with aviation, flight, and they come up with this really whimsical piece that also was really well received by the community. And there's something to say about trying to look into these sort of options to activate a collection, because I understand that oftentimes a lot of museums, they have like these great collections, but they don't necessarily have the real estate, or they don't have like even the exhibition team bandwidth to actually put exhibition together with that collection. Sometimes with minimal efforts, you can actually get a great return, right? Because you also get to talk about the people that donated the pieces to the collection when you are releasing or coming out with the press release for these sort of collaborations.
I really like you know, the sort of serendipity of putting these people together where you're not exactly sure what the end results are going to be, but you sort of, there's sort of that trust in the process and sort of willingness to let people's enthusiasm sort of take over. And I think that those are really important aspects. Does that project, is it documented in any way on the web to an extent?
So I believe that the project, I think it ended once myself and Kevin Arrow moved on, but I think it's still documented in the website of Frost Science under Couriers Boat, and you definitely, it's well documented by media outlets, because when we were doing those like event-based releases, like like a bunch of media, local media from Miami came. The pictures are really nice. The pieces are really nice and engaging. So it's easy to find
maybe
them. Yeah.
Maybe we can between us ferret out some links and include it on the back end of this video for people.
Yeah, I can send you the link. You can put it at the bottom of the video.
That'd be great.
Yep.
And so now here you are in Colorado. What are you up to in Colorado? That
well, I can talk about another project at Frost Science. That it was like kind of crazy conception. It was like, it didn't last long, but it served its purpose. So the challenge basically was that we had like this huge gallery, and we did not have it was a huge gallery for traveling exhibitions, and we did not have the first exhibition yet. So we were trying to come up with ideas of how to fill it. And what we did, we kind of like deconstructed the traditional light exhibit. And for that, we worked with Matthew Schreiber, outstanding artist, works with lasers. Earlier in his career, he worked with James Turrell. Now he's like his own thing. Check it out, because like he's really good. But anyway, we kind of deconstructed the traditional light exhibition, and we were able to do this by working with an artist that would challenge those science museum stereotypical way of approaching an exhibition. So those tables ended being the sides of an octahedron that was actually a stage, and it was actually in the end like a science demonstration, and it was surrounded by lasers. The name was LASERsHOW or LASERsHOW, and we consulted with you a little bit on that, because you know, like your expertise on trying to do things that have not been done before. And the good thing about these is that I'm not sure it worked the way we envision, but we brought a lot of like new people into the museum. It was really well received on the artistic community in Miami, seeking new experiences and being challenged by new immersive experience in a way that was meaningful, right? Like you would get there, you would be surrounded by lasers, you would be learning about light, lasers, diffraction, refraction, and all that in an environment that it was not like nothing else that you had experienced before. Anyway, that was also like this great thing.
Well, I think that sort of brings up again, you sort of need to be willing to put yourself out there and to go on to venture off into the unknown. You know, you're not really sure, is this thing going to work the way we think it's going to work? You need to have a certain level of fearlessness to do that. But then, like you say, even if it didn't come across maybe with some of your original conceptions, then here are a whole new set of relationships and things you've learned that are helpful for future projects. And it's still interesting, the process. So hit me with one last one from your work now in Colorado that has some takeaways that you think might be important for people to consider when they're looking for art and science blended together or integrated with each other.
So basically, I get to wear many hats here in Colorado. I do work with the Art Museum here in UC Boulder. I do work with the Natural History Museum. I do work with the Fisk Planetarium. And then I get to co-direct the Nature, Environment, Science, and Technology Studio for the Arts, which is an initiative that got a bunch of money from the Grand Challenge umbrella. The Grand Challenge is this thing that Obama put out the last year of his administration, saying like, we need people and institutions to really stand up to the challenges of the future and to start thinking how are going to be defeating those challenges. How ironic that we're actually now trying to, you know, beat one of those. But anyway, what we did, we are actually the only arts and humanities effort within this, because like most of the people that got money from the Grand Challenge Initiative are people trying to scientifically solve scientific challenges. What we said is like, in order to defeat those challenges, we're also gonna need thinkers that think more on the realm of the arts. And that, I guess, was in sync with someone that was making those decisions. And we were able to get a pile of money that now we use to do something that I love, which is like support the work of those partnerships. So one of my favorite efforts is like we support the work of graduate students. When you're a graduate student, you still have the bandwidth to really entertain these other things outside of your field. We tried with faculty, but like between teaching duties, research duties, and committees and all that, we weren't getting the right response. But then we tried grad students, and it's been just amazing, beautiful. Like, so the only rule is that the graduate students need to be partnered up. And there's a graduate students from the sciences in the broadest possible sense, and one graduate students from the arts in the broadest possible sense. It's like, it's fine for I identify as an artist or identify as a scientist, even though my degree is this or is that. And we've had so much success in like serving them and making them realize that there are many other ways that they can tackle their own projects. I'm gonna share one project. There was this graduate student in mechanical engineer. Now he's got his PhD. He got his PhD after working on this project, but he was working with adsorbent materials. These are materials that are actually able to adsorb, and that's with a D, because they work like sponges. pollutants from the environment. And one of the reasons that he and his advisor were interested in looking at this is because they were trying to clean up those indoor spaces that are the most polluted. People would probably think car mechanics, but actually one of the most polluted indoor environments is actually nail salons. What that means is that this actually has an impact on the health of the people working on nail salons.
A lot of volatiles in that closed environment.
Yeah, exactly. So these actually, it's a health issue, and it's specifically a health issue. A lot of women, because like they represent most of the people that work at those nail salons, and a lot of them are also Asian American women. So they were seeing that, like they were having some health issues above the average just by being exposed to those volatiles and those pollutants. So that was one of the main ideas of why they wanted to do this research. So they were more or less at a standstill because, like the kind of machine, in the broader possible sense, that they were developing, it was something ugly and noisy. Nail salons are places that celebrate beauty, and owners are not going to be inclined to bring into the nail salon something that is, ugly and noisy.
Making a lot of noise and upsetting customers.
Exactly. So through our program, he partnered with a ceramicist. And then they started working back and forth at his lab, at her workshop, and eventually they were able to develop some sort of like clay, if you want to call it clay, that would retain the absorbent properties of the materials that he was working with, so they could actually build beautiful sculptures. And that's what they did. They built beautiful sculptures, and they actually engaged with a few nail salon owners, like, would you put these in your space, if at the same time would clean the environment. And it was wonderful, and it was great, and actually the collaboration became part of his PhD thesis manuscript, and they were finalists for an APA startup grant, and they're now exploring other options. And it was beautiful because it really illustrated a true collaboration between a scientist and an artist, because both of their minds and approaches were needed in order to make this happen. Usually, when you think about science and art collaboration, you think, okay, this is a scientist asking for an artist to illustrate his or her work, right? Or when you think of the other artist, an artist that is going to go get inspired by the artist and go back and do something by him or herself, No, this was a true collaboration in the sense that both minds were required in order to come up with a solution.
Well, it seems like, especially with this example, but the other examples, you're creating a true partnership, and you're really keeping things loose and open at the beginning. It's not like a deterministic partnership, like, oh, you're going to illustrate these molecules, so that's what the collaboration between art and science is. It's more like, okay, it's almost like speed dating for artists and scientists. Like you set up these creative partnerships and say, okay, you both are smart people and you both are interesting people. Let's see where this goes, and being willing to support that sort of level of looseness or flexibility at the beginning.
Actually, when we open our proposals, when we open like our calls so people can apply, we actually hold 1 or 2 speed dating events in which, like, we welcome all artists and scientists to come by and just like speed date each other. Like, what are you doing? And it's really amazing. It's really great, especially again, like, I think we hit the jackpot with the graduate student mindset, because they're willing to really dive into something slightly outside of their expertise.
Well,
And
that flexibility and openness and looseness again.
but they've become the best ambassadors. Like the first year we got like X amount of calls. The second year, like it grew, like it grew as in like that we need to delay the decision because we didn't have time to review all the proposals because we weren't anticipating. And then we realized that it grew because the first cohort became these wonderful ambassadors to the project, to the efforts, and we keep getting more and more applications every year because I think grad students realize that this could benefit my work, and at the same time, it's like a distraction from my work that will have an impact. You know, I can distract my mind, work with someone else, learn new things, and bring it back into.
What a concept.
Yes.
Somebody's actually learning something and having fun and benefiting their careers.
And let me tell you, like, we've gotten a few of pushback by the advisors at the beginning, right? And I've met with some of the advisors, like, because like the student come to me, I really want to do this, but my advisor is not sure how this is gonna benefit. Well, a lot of these graduate students, they don't have like funds or stipend for the summer. We fully cover those, like these we support like three months of summer. So in that sense, like they can still do work because they have like, they can pay for their rent, they can pay for their bills. So, you know, even if they're not covered by the advisors during the summer, they'll be also doing work because they don't need to worry about these things. Anyway, but like I met with some of the advisors, and like I've explained what this is about. I explained how this can be beneficial. It's also easy for me to talk about this because I represent this amalgam of science and art. And, you know, I'm a professor like most of their advisors, so I can talk to them at the same level. But let me tell you, a lot of them then have written back to us, to myself and my co-directors, thanking us for the effort, thanking us for supporting their students, and also realizing of how beneficial this impact has been for the student and how they feel that person is better ready for, you know, a post-graduation world. So it's working, and we are really happy about the project overall.
Well, that might be a good way to end this on a happy note and a positive note where people are getting good things out of these collaborations. But wait, there's a bonus thought.
Yeah, I like to add something, because what this makes me realize is that how important it is to bring everyone that matters into developing programs or exhibitions in museums early on. It's not that like, oh, let's talk to the scientists first, and when we have the science nailed down, then we'll move to the creatives and we'll brief them on the science. And like, no, we need to put everyone in the same room since the beginning. We need people that are good at facilitating those conversations, because that's gonna guarantee that the outcome is gonna be the best possible one. That doesn't say that if you do it in a traditional way, and it's like step by step, you can still get a great outcome. But let me tell you, that's not the best possible outcome. You get the best possible outcome by bringing people early enough. There's a value like having the interpreter and the scientist and the creative all together in the same room, bringing their expertise and their ways of thinking to tackle the problem. Because like the scientist might get questions from them that otherwise he or she does never get.
And I think that's a great point. That's a great bonus point. I mean, if you bring people in early, you're telling them that they're an important part of the project, not just an add-on at the end, or not just window dressing. Oh, we want to show that we're inclusive, or we're this, or we're that. Instead, you're like, okay, we're all at the same level. We value everyone. You're bringing in early, and we want to hear from everyone, not, you know, you're this advisor who comes in twice during a 3-year project or something. So yeah, I think that's a great point. You know, the earlier the earlier you are in a project, the more impact you have on that project.
And it's always going to be beneficial. Like I've been thinking recently about friction, right? A lot of people think about friction as a negative connotation. But then I keep thinking like, well, as long as everyone that is experiencing the friction has like the mindset of like, let's try to make something happen, that friction is needed, because without friction, there's no fire and there's no warmth. And there's no people sitting around the campfire sharing their stories. So that friction is needed, you know? I mean, what I'll ask is that everyone that comes into the table do it with a constructive mindset, but friction needs to happen in order to come up with fire.
One of my museum friends says, no pressure, no diamonds. So
yeah, same thing, yeah.
So, well, Dr. Jorge, great to see you again. Great to hear your thoughts about art and science. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Paul. It's been my pleasure.